Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Marilyn London, membership chairman and board member of the Friends of the Stirling Road Library. And I welcome you all tonight to wonderful Batia's fabulous program. I am excited to listen, especially the families of the artists who I really like. So this is a great one. Thank you all, friends, for supporting us and making it possible for us to have Batia and the other wonderful facilitators that we have. Robert Watson will be at the library in person in a month. Watch your newsletter for date and time on that one. And the other thing to make sure you know is that at the last Sunday of this month, there will be another wonderful book fair. So if you've got books that you want to donate, get them ready and donate them now. And please attend and join us on that Sunday. It's the 27th. Hopefully everybody is getting their newsletters and all of the emails that we send. If you're not, please make sure to contact us, because what we do is we just make sure that we straighten them out if for some reason you're not getting them. So please make sure to contact us so that you know what's happening. I see a lot of new names. There must be Batia groupies like the rest of us are. If you're interested in knowing more about the Friends of the Library, we would be thrilled to let you know. Go to www.stirlingfriends.org if you're interested in knowing more. Contact us. We would love for you to join us. There are over 450 friends, and so we must be doing something very right. The book this month for Linda Levin is the banned book, Catcher in the Rye. I don't know about you guys, but I read it and I don't know why it's banned, but somebody must have a reason somewhere. She will do a great presentation on that one. There are just too many programs to tell you about. Read your newsletters so you don't have to listen to me. Make sure that you please all mute. Everybody go on mute, or else we'll hear your telephone conversations and all the rest of it. And I think that's about it. So without further ado, I'm so excited for all of your lectures, but especially this one. So Batia, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. Thank you for the Friends of the Stirling Road Library. As Marilyn said, your donation is important for me, of course, but we're going to start the class today. I have a little bit of a cold, so I hope I don't get a lot of coughing. So you're going to excuse me beforehand. So we're going to start with these artists that are after the Impressionists. And this, when we talk about art, we're talking about people who know how to describe things. After the Impressionism, we have artists going into the everyday life, painting their families, painting their siblings, their children, their, I don't know, lovers, etc. But with Gauguin, Van Gogh, and Munch, we always focus on their lives, what happens to their art. As we're going to see, they also paint the people around them. And the actual artist is exposed. When you're talking about the families, he's going to show his own feelings about his families. And each one of these three artists that I chose, they have a different approach to it, as we're going to see. So little by little, we're going to share those experiences, those feelings of this artist, as we're going to see. So Gauguin is the first one that I chose. And you have here, let me think one moment, because there's something here that is bothering me. I'm so sorry, in my view. So let me just stop the share and I'm going to share it again. There's something going on here. Okay. Got it. Okay. So he's going to meet his wife, met Sophie Gad in Paris. She was Dutch. She was a governess of children of the Prime Minister of Denmark in France. So this is how they meet, and they fall in love. They marry really quickly, and he has a very promising career as a stockbroker. As a hobby, he paints. Little by little, as probably you know, he gets more interested in painting, and the hobby becomes his profession. At that time, he's a connoisseur, he's a collector of art, he has a great art collection, and he's very, very, I would say, well off when they get married. They are gonna start having children. So Emil is gonna be born in 1879, and he's gonna be sculpted in a very classical way. Gauguin sculpts his face, and this is the only sculpture in the exhibition of the Impressionists in 1879. And I'm sorry, and when he shows us, is actually the name of the Impressionists. I'm sorry, it's not of the Impressionists. And they're gonna be criticizing all of the paintings of the Impressionists, but this sculpture is gonna be the best because it is very classical. So of course, later on, we know that people are gonna be interested in the Impressionism, and people are gonna forget about the sculpture of his son. He's gonna keep on going, and he's going to show with the Impressionists a couple of times more, and later he's gonna go his own way, as we know, of course, of his career. Met is gonna be his muse. And as you can see her here, she's reclining in a sofa, asleep. As he progresses, and he's more interested in painting and more interested in just dedicating his life into art, he's going to go into a more different characteristic of his painting. He's gonna be more expressive. He's going to be interested in representing color and feelings through color as well. A lot of symbolism in his paintings. But this painting in particular, this is an early painting. So we see already the brushstrokes of the Impressionists, a very fast brushstroke, but Met is his muse. This happens very often. The wife or the lover becomes the muse, or the other way around. The muse becomes the lover or the wife later on. So as we go on with his life and with his family, we're going to see on and on, he paints his children as they are born, as they are babies. Aline, who died pretty young, is painted right here as a baby. At that time, he decides to be an artist, and they move to a poorer side of Paris. We know exactly where they live, in 8 Rue Carcel, which is the name of the street. And at that time, he already has a studio in his home. But his portraits are very classical, although most of them are not finished like this one. But he captured the essence of the baby, of his children. As we go on, we can see that he changes his style. Much more fast, much more expressive, much brighter colors, as you see this one. And this is also Aline, and he also incorporates space. Here we have an interior with Aline. And as you can see, she's kind of peeling some apples or oranges. I don't know exactly what kind of peaches, probably a fruit. She is in this kitchen that also incorporates a table and a sofa, but we know that it's a kitchen because probably, or maybe it's not a kitchen, but they have a stove in the back only to warm the room. As we go on, we can see Aline in several locations. So he's still trying to get his own style. He is representing here his own children, his child right here in this double portrait, one in profile, one frontal, but the color becomes more vibrant, more expressive. The brushstroke becomes larger, so not as small as the Impressionists were doing. Already at this time, we have 20 years of Impressionism. So Impressionism is already passé, it's long gone, and he is finding other ways of expression, other ways of depicting. So his family becomes part of this exploration. And this we find only during this period. The Impressionists are the ones who start to represent their families, and later the post-Impressionists, like Gauguin, Van Gogh, etc., who are going to represent their families as well. Everyday life becomes important to be acknowledged, to be expressing to be showing what you are, but also what you feel. And this is met Gauguin, again, his wife. So it's not important to represent all of the characteristics or the features of her face. You can see her face in the shadows. Actually, we don't see all of the details, but we do see what she's doing on the table. We see all of the items for her task, what she's doing. She's embroidering something. So it looks like there is a space that is very close and it's an interior space. But look at the table. It's full of color, the yarn probably that she's doing, and she's very, very much concentrated in whatever she is doing at the time. So the interest in Gauguin shifts from representing only space to also represent movement. And little by little, we see his colors that we know, of course, later on in his career, like this one. I love this one because it is one of his children. This is Clovis. He was born in 1879. And already we see that the background becomes alive. It is probably a wallpaper, and it is combined with the image of the child, the image of a pot or a ceramic piece that we have in front, and the combination of colors. Also look at how, I would say, organized is the brushstroke. In the back, we see vertical lines. So they come down, all of those vertical lines. So it shows you a different depth. Then we see horizontal lines for the table. And you can see the kind of this horizon or what divides the table from the wall. And then look what he does. The reflection on the table is vibrant. So it's kind of curved right here, as we see on the right-hand side. And Clovis is completely unaware of what's happening in his surroundings, but he's part of this composition, which is also very lively. We have sketches from many of his children, like Jean-René, who was born in 1881. And we see that he combines two different techniques. He uses watercolors, also carbon, and we see that the expression of the baby as he's being called probably to one side is of amusement. It's really beautiful to see that Jean-René became a sculptor. And the sculpture that I'm showing you here is one of the examples of Jean-René. It is rather interesting to study what happened after these geniuses died, because most of the time we see that some of the children go on to find an artistic career as well, as you can see in this example. So he becomes a sculptor. We have some images when she shows his whole family together, but we know also what happened to him during this period when he paints this. And in 1882, the French stock market crashes. So he needs money. He's also in a financial crisis himself, and he's going to sell his collection of paintings. Remember, he was a connoisseur, an art collector. He begins to be a painter, and he's no longer a financier. And he will have the painter's family in the garden at the house of Rue Carcel in one of the gardens. It's not his garden at all. It is the garden at that street. So we can see that the family is growing, and he has already 3 children in that time. We have here Matt, and his 3 children and one on the stroller or a crib. And this painting I wanted to show you because it is of his 4th child. This is Paul Ronon, named Paula, who becomes an artist. And this is a self-portrait made by Paula. So it's interesting to see that in the back, we have an image of one of the paintings of his father, of the Tahitian period, and we can recognize it in the back. So it is a self-portrait that Paul Roland made, and he includes some of the images that he had in his house, of course, some of the sculptures or the paintings that were done by his father. He keeps on painting Matt, his family. And in 1884, they go to Denmark. Remember, she was Danish, Matt was Danish, and the financial crisis makes him look for something different. And she convinces him to go to Denmark with her family. So they all travel to Denmark. And here we have one painting of Matt. So what we're looking here is not only a portrait, because it's not as important, but the posture, how she is shifting her weight in that chair. She is showing her profile. She has a fan on her hand. She has gloves as well. And in the back, there is a mirror. The combination of color is what is interesting right here. Look how we find this part of a curtain full of different colors. So we really don't know what color are the curtains in reality. Although the skirt is also full of different colors, we have green and we have red, we can figure out that this is a red skirt, but also the shirt probably is a white shirt and it's full of color, pink and yellow and green and even blue and purple, all of them together. That is what it makes this kind of painting so vibrant, so alive, and so beautiful. So here we have a photograph of the whole family, met in the center, sitting here, and the 5 children all around. Here we have all of the names, so you can see each one of them, when they were born, when they died. And in 1885, he goes back to Paris. He leaves Mère Sophie with his 5 children, and he is seeking another kind of life, of course, of an artist. When he goes to Paris, he takes with him his son Clovis. We know that he suffered from depression. We know also that he attempted suicide once, and later on in Tahiti, supposedly another time. But he is seeking a professional career as an artist. And here we have a painting done of Clovis with a book in front of him, flowers in the back. We know that he goes to Pont-Aven first for 6 months with some other friends, artist friends. And this is a photograph of him with 2 of his sons, with his wife on the right-hand side and Clovis on the left-hand side. And this photograph was taken just before he left for Tahiti in 1891. By the way, he went twice to Tahiti. The second one, he did not return. And he's not going to see his family after that. His family, of course, was left in Europe, and he travels to Tahiti. As he is going to leave, some of the paintings that he leaves are like this one. This is a study of a child asleep, and probably is one of his children. This is one of the last that we have of his family in Europe. But also, he's going to paint from a photograph his mother. Aline Marie Chazal Tristan came from a Peruvian family, a very important family. And this painting was done after she died. She was dead already 25 years. So she's going to be painted as an idealization when she was younger from a photograph that Gauguin had it. Exactly the same year that he leaves for Tahiti. But already we see here the colors that he's going to use later on. And this is another painting, but not done by Gauguin, by Jules Law, of his mother. So it's a little bit different. Look at the eyes, look at the nose. But remember, this is also an idealization of his mother as a young girl. When he goes to Tahiti, he's going to have a lover, Paura, even though for the Tahitian, she's going to become his wife. She was a daughter of his neighbors in Punauia, where he lived. And with her, he's going to have 2 children, one daughter that died in infancy, and a boy that was raised by herself. So here we have a very interesting representation of how he lived in Tahiti. Paura was 14 years old when they met. And this painting is the name, that the title that he gave is Teta Mari no Atua, is the God's child. And what we see here is this girl. She's lying down on the bed after childbirth. She just gave birth to this beautiful baby. We have the baby right here with a halo. So it's God's child. So it's really very interesting to see. At that time, probably she was pregnant. Probably she hadn't given birth yet. But who's God? If this is God's baby, is this Jesus? Is his own interpretation? Or is his own baby? And Gauguin thinks that he is God. You can think about that. but it is an activity. It is a religious painting in a Tahitian setting. So it is a stable where Jesus Christ is born, and we know that his child died a few days after she was born. Here we have a cat, which is really interesting, which is a reminiscent of this painting by Manet, Olympia, because he had a copy. And some things are very similar. The cat, of course, the division of the room. Of course, we don't have a servant as we see in Olympia, who was a courtesan. And the servant is bringing some flowers from an admirer. But we do have a cat also in the Tahitian setting. We also have the division right here with this column and the division in this place as well. So it is kind of reminiscent of the painting by Manet. Also, he's going to incorporate the kind of carvings that were done in Tahiti, as we find in other of his paintings, and we see it right here. So it is the admiration of those carvings, but also Gauguin himself, he's going to do them in many of his sculptures. He's going to use this traditional way of representing that, traditional, I'm saying, in Tahiti, but also he's going to do them and use them in his own sculptures. So you can see just an example of those carvings that were used and still are used in Tahiti. This photograph shows you the house where he lived in Punauia in Tahiti when he moved in 1897. And we have here one sculpture, a very classical sculpture, in the front yard of his hut, as you find in this very interesting photograph. Today, the hut has been reconstructed in Atuona, where he also lived, and we find also the entrance, what he carved the name of the house, Maison de Jeu, excuse me, which is the house of pleasure, of play. So we have here the lintel, today is at the Musée d'Orsay, but he had it in the entrance of his house. In this painting, we have also Pahura, and he was married to her in the Tahitian tradition. The title of this painting is Nevermore, or Tahiti, and the painting shows you the sensual curved line of the body of Pahura. The title is right here in the left-hand side, but there's also in the background two people talking, and she's kind of distressed. She has this feeling or this expression that she is listening, but look at her face and her gaze, like she is looking or trying to think about her life. And if you read about Gauguin's life and how he controlled her somehow, and he wouldn't let her out of the house, and she was really very, very sad, and she didn't like that relationship at all during this time, but she knew that she was married to him. Look at the curved line of her body. Look also at the colors on her skin, the combination, what I was talking about before. This is his final expression of color, but also the parallelism of lines. We have some kind of a rhythm between the head of the bed with the lines of her body, but also we see that in the back, there is an opening, or probably a painting. It's not very clear. It looks like it is a window, and there is a raven. And there's a reference to Edgar Allan Poe. And we know that he would write about it. And Edgar Allan Poe wrote, "A morning student is visited by a raven, croaks, nevermore." And that is why we have the title here, and that he is explaining more or less why the raven is there. And this is in response to his every question. So he takes this phrase from the raven that was written by Edgar Allan Poe. He incorporates it here, the bird, of course, but also the title. And then we have these two people here probably gossiping, which is rather interesting. So we have another artist, Vincent van Gogh. And very often we see his self-portraits, the way that he represented the landscapes with a lot of emotion and very violent kind of brushstroke. and we see expression through his colors as well. And you think, well, do these people really have a family? We saw that Gauguin had it, but we saw also how he treated them and what happened to his family. But in this case, Van Gogh never married. So he's not going to be portraying his children or his wife, but we have other people that he is going to paint. And this is the artist's grandfather. This is Van Gogh's grandfather. That very beginning of his career as an artist, he's going to paint whoever is nearby. And one of them, of course, was his grandfather. So we have also that his own father is going to be very strict. And when his father died, he's going to paint this still life painting. It is a book and is the Bible. And also we see that there is a candle. And he paints this composition when his father died. And he's going to kind of honor his father. He was also very religious. He was a pastor. And we find the combination of the exploration of his art. Still, we don't see the Van Gogh that we're going to see when he moves to Paris. We have a very somber palette in this representation. As we go on, we're going to see more and more of his change of colors and style. But he's going to paint some of his siblings. We have here his parents, Theodorus and Anna. Also, Vincent was the oldest. Anna Cornelia, Theo, who's going to be very close to him, Elisabetta, Wilhelmina, who was nicknamed Will, and Cornelius. He's also going to be very close to Wilhelmina, as we're going to see some paintings. So this is his mother. And he paints her from a photograph. He uses that acid green in the background. And that reflection of the green on her face is rather interesting. I find it really very beautiful because it expresses more and it shows a contrast with a real life flesh. And also we have the expression of the black. Black, usually you didn't see the brushstroke, but because of his style, we can see each one of the lines that he is representing right here. She, by the way, was also an amateur artist, and she's going to impulse Van Gogh to be an artist as well. And here we have a photograph of her. Of course, it's an idealized version of his own mother. He's going to be very close to her. He's going to write to her very often. He's going to describe his painting to her. And also we see Theo. Theo, he's a very good brother. He was an art dealer. He's going to help him financially all through his career, through his life, very short life. But Theo was gaining some money. He was earning some money. So he would send Van Gogh supplies, also money. And here we have a painting, probably a self-portrait, or probably a painting of Theo Van Gogh, his brother. People are not so sure because they look alike. And of course, with a hat, it's very hard to tell. On the other hand, we have this one. When they studied and they cleaned it, they thought, and they declared, the specialists, that it was a portrait of Theo. This one as well, there's also that confusion. They do not know if it's a portrait of Vincent van Gogh or Theo van Gogh, but also they, as I mentioned, they are very similar. At some point, they're not going to be as similar as we see them here. Will, as I mentioned, Wilhelmine, she was also very close to Vincent. She wanted to become a writer. She's going to be a governess, a nurse. She never married. She was a religion teacher. And she's going to write back and forth between Van Gogh, Vincent, and Will. And they're going to talk about literature, modern art. She wanted to know everything that was happening in France, about Paris, about what he was doing, about what he was reading. And we have this painting that Van Gogh made and probably is inspired by her because she was an avid reader as well. And he writes to her and describes this painting, which is called The Novel Reader. And he says, this is the title, of course, in French, in English is A Novel Reader, or a reader of novels, un liseuse de romance. And he describes it like that. The luxuriant hair very black, a green bodice, the sleeves the color of wine leaves, the skirt black, the background all yellow, bookshelves with books. She's holding a yellow book in her hands. So she knew exactly what he was doing, what he was painting. Not only that, he's going to give her 2 paintings for her birthday. One is this one, Blossoming Almond Branch in a glass with a book, and also is described to her in a letter, a little study of a book for you. And this one here as well, which is Still Life with pile of French novels and a glass with a rose. And those are Parisian novels, also kind of interesting that he puts that they are Parisian novels. And he describes it to her as well. On a somewhat larger scale, a flower with a lot of books with pink, green, with red bindings. They were my set of 7 Parisian novels. Of course, this is the link that he had with his family in the Netherlands. But the most treasured thing that we have are his more than 600 letters that he sent to Theo. And we know and we learn a lot about his life and about his paintings, about what he's doing, his sketches in many of the letters, the painting that he's planning to do or what he's doing at the time. And for example, I'm going to quote from one of the letters. I enjoy the walk from home to the office and in the evening from the office back home. It takes about 3/4 of an hour. So we have details about his daily life, about what were his interests, what he was planning to do, like this landscape with the trees without any leaves, or this one where the perspective goes through the road and also through the houses in the back, describing it to Theo. So as I mentioned, more than 600 letters from Vincent to Theo, describing every detail of his life. So we learn a lot about Vincent through the letter that he sent to Theo, but also to Will, as I mentioned, and to his mother. Some of them have colors even in his descriptions and also in his paintings, like this one. And not only the description that he writes, but what he paints. Another thing that we know about Theo is that he had an arrangement with an alcoholic prostitute. Her nickname was Cien. Her complete name was Klasina Maria Hornig. She was actually pregnant when they met, and she had a daughter already. Of course, his father didn't like it at all, that relationship, and he's going to stay with her another year after he met her. As you can see in this drawing, this is Cien. She is sewing something. The daughter is sitting down on the floor. They were very poor, but they lived together for a whole year. And then when she gets pregnant, she's going to say that it is Vincent van Gogh's child, but that it was completely impossible. As we see, some of those relationships are, I would say, they stay with us through his drawings, through his paintings, and we know the people that he met through that. So they are autobiographical. So not only through his writings, through his descriptions, but through his drawings as well. You have here again another drawing of Cien. Finally, 1883, he's going to leave her. She went back to prostitution and she drowned herself in the river in 1904. A terrible, terrible life of this girl. But I have to mention this painting because it is a family, the Potato Eaters. It's a very famous painting. It's probably his first masterpiece. And it is a summary of characters. So he's going to paint each one of them individually. And then he's going to put them together in this very poor space with very dark colors. The palette is very somber. It's very dark. It's very sad. The whole thing is very sad. So it's very, very expressive. And we know this, again, also through a letter that he sends to Theo. And he writes, See, this is what the composition has now become. I've painted it on a very large canvas. And as the sketch is now, I believe there's life in it. And of course there is. If you compare this painting by Joseph Israels, which is also a representation of a poor family. It is a peasant family at the table, and he was a very famous painting from the Hague School. So of course, Van Gogh would know about this kind of painting. The light is, excuse me, is coming from a window, and the children are eating in a very poor setting. If we compare both of them, they are very different. One has more of a close-up. The other one has more light. There's the idea of hope, probably. There's more of space, so there's kind of a respite that you can breathe in Israel's painting. In Van Gogh's painting, he's showing the reality of life, how they are distressed. And the sketches that he does, with color, are showing you the process of how he's thinking about the composition. One light on top of it, everything is very dark, monochrome, green with black or brown, and all of them are surrounding a table. So as I mentioned, he's going to paint each one of the characters individually. And as he progresses in the painting, he's going to sketch hands, how they are using the gestures, how they are going to pick up the fork or the potatoes on the table, which is the only meal they have. They came back, all of them after, I'm sorry, let me go back a second. They came back, they just came back from work, and they all are very tired. Everything is very, very dark, as I mentioned, and they are distressed, they are sad. So not only the expression of their faces, but also the color that he uses. And I come to this painting, and I'm so sorry that I have this on top of it, because I want to show you this painting is a painting drawn from memory, fantasy, if you like to say. But this is his mother right here and his sister. And he's going to paint it in a pointillist style. So he uses dots to portray his mother and his sister. He hasn't seen them in a very long time when he paints it, but he's going to write to them, and he's going to describe it to Will. And he describes it as this. The younger of two ladies who are out for a walk is wearing a Scottish shawl with green and orange checks and a red parasol. The old lady has a violet shawl, nearly black, but a bunch of dahlias, some of them citron yellow, the others pink and white mixed, are like an explosion of color on the somber figure. Behind them, a few cedar shrubs and emerald green cypresses. Behind the cypresses, one sees a field of pale green and red cabbages, surrounded by a border of little white flowers. The sandy path is of a raw orange color. The foliage of the two beds of scarlet geraniums is very green. Finally, the adjacent plain, there is a maidservant, dressed in blue, who is arranging a profusion of plants with white, pink, yellow, and vermilion red flowers. So, representing them in a completely different array of colors. If you compare this, which is part of his family, in comparison to the potato eaters, when he goes to France and he meets Pissarro and he meets the Impressionists, he's going to use a brighter palette, as you can see here. But later on, when he is with Gauguin, and this is one of the discussions that they had in our, he's going to paint from memory. He's not going to be in front of his mother and sister. He's not going to be in front of this path or of these flowers. He wants to portray them in this fantastic representation. So he changes a lot while he's painting this. But still, this is his mother and his sister. And he goes on describing what he is. Here you are. I know this is hardly what one might call a likeness, but for me, it renders the poetic character and the style of the garden as I feel it. At the same, let us suppose that the two ladies out for a walk are you and our mother. Let us even suppose that there is not, at the least, absolutely not the least vulgar and fatuous resemblance. Yet the deliberate choice of color, the somber violet with the block of violent citron yellow on the dahlias, suggests mother's personality to me. The figure in the Scotch plaid with orange and green checks stands out against the somber green of the cypress, with contrast is further accentuated by the red parasol. This figure gives me an impression of you, like those in Dickens' novels, a vaguely representative figure. So it's rather interesting to see how he represents his family. And the most important person was not painted by him, but by her second husband. And this is the wife of Theo. She is the one who published, and actually she is the one who kept all of the letters that Vincent sent to Theo. And she published them in 1914. Joanna Bonger, when she was left alone, she was a widow. Theo died 6 months after Vincent. She is going to be the one who actually impulses or catapults Vincent to be a star. Of course, he was dead already, but through her, we have those letters, which is rather amazing. And here we have a photograph. But what we do have is what is really interesting, because here we have a photograph with her son, Willem. And when Vincent learned that he had a nephew, he's going to be inspired to do this painting. So even though he'd never met him, he didn't paint his nephew, he's going to paint this beautiful almond blossom. And he writes to his mother, when he learns the news, I started right away to make a picture for him, to hang in their bedroom, branches of white almond blossom against a blue sky. And it gives you this kind of tranquility. It's a beautiful painting. And he was inspired by the tradition of Japan, the ukiyo-e, those prints that he had a collection of Japanese prints. But it's rather interesting that even though we don't have a painting of Willem, we do have a painting for Willem. Willem is going to be the founder of the museum, the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And we finally get to the other artist that I chose, which is Edvard Munch. And his family is also going to be portrayed in a very interesting way. Here we have as a portrait, he never married, but we see that his family is going to influence him a lot in his representation. His father was very strict, and he's going to refer to him as temperamentally nervous and obsessively religious to the point of psychoneurosis. For him, I inherited the seeds of madness. The angels of fear, sorrow, and death stood by my side since the day I was born. He's going to portray his father in several occasions, even though he had a very strenuous relationship with him, because he was very, very strict. He has an oppressive religious upbringing. Munch had this oppressive religious upbringing. His father would tell them stories, and he had terrible nightmares. So Edward, on the other hand, had very poor health, so he would stay at home very often because he was sick. And he always felt that death was constantly advancing on him, and he would be dead very soon. That did not happen. He had also a lot of siblings, and here we have his mother in the center, and his older sister, Joanne Sophie. Edward is on the right-hand side, Peter Andreas, Laura, who's the baby, and Joanne on one side. Laura, by the way, she's going to have a mental illness later on in life. And the younger Inger, who was also very close to Munch, which is not, she doesn't appear here in this photograph, but here we have her as a young lady later on. And as you're going to see, everything affected his painting. His mother is going to die when he's 3 years old, and he's going to refer to that moment very often. This child, impressed by what is happening. His mother died of tuberculosis, and this is not the only painting or drawing that he made of this feeling that he had. He going to repeat it very often. And in his family, there were a lot of death and a lot of issues, and he's going to suffer through them, as I mentioned. again, we have another representation of the deaf mother and the child that does not comprehend what's happening, but he's or he or she is suffering while everybody is also in mourning or crying, and the whole space shows you sadness, desperation, and many other feelings. He's going to be taken care by his aunt Karen and by his father. So the aunt Karen is going to be portrayed also by Edvard Munch in several occasions. This is one example. And his father, again, painted later on, his father on the couch as he's reading the newspaper. So Laura, as I mentioned, she's going to be diagnosed with a mental illness at an early age. And she's also going to be portrayed by him. And you can see her gaze looking into the void, into the nothingness. Already probably here, there were some signs of her mental illness. So she's going to be portrayed also in several occasions by Edvard Munch in a very realistic way, or later on, like this one, which is his other brother, Andreas, painted here in front of this window, sitting down in front of the table. And actually, he's the only one from his siblings that was married, and he died a few months after the wedding. Very sad, as I mentioned, all of his the death that was happening around his family. And Munch is going to say, I inherited two of mankind's most frightful enemies, the heritage of consumption, which is how his mother died, and insanity, which was his sister. And another trauma for him was when his sister, his older sister, Joan Sophie, dies when she was 14 years old. It was really very traumatic. Again, she died of tuberculosis, consumption. But we have paintings probably dedicated to this moment, the sick child. He did 6 oil paintings with this topic, very similar composition, but he made many lithographs, dry points, etchings, all through his career until 1926, not through the last years of his career, but many years he was painting this topic over and over again, kind of this memory or a record of the death of his older sister. And he said that this painting was his first soul painting, where you have the feelings shown through the painting. Also, we have a very interesting composition. There is the medicine on top of the table, the glass also on the other table, kind of this diagonal line that connects the two tables, but also look at the parallel lines of the arm and the hand and the face and the head of the child, and supposedly the mother that probably was the aunt. The large pillow in the back is also something that they would use because they would have to be sitting down the last moments of somebody who had tuberculosis. They couldn't breathe very well, so they would be sitting down. And there's this haunted expression of the sick child. On the other hand, we see probably the aunt, this grieving woman, probably is Karen, the aunt, that cannot bear to look at the child in the eye as the child is suffering. But also look at the vertical brushstrokes on the right-hand side of the curtain. Again, we see a lot of expression because what we see here is exactly what Munch was feeling. So he painted, he scrubbed, he scratched, and he repainted. And for over a year, he was coming back to this painting. For him, it was a frustrating experience because it was kind of this obsession of painting or channeling his suffering through his paintings. So look at these scratches that he does here. They're all on purpose. This is part of the expression of his paintings. And he later wrote that this moment when he painted this was a breakthrough in his art. And he said, I started as an impressionist, but during the violent mental and vital convulsions of the Bohemian period, Impressionism gave me an insufficient expression. I had to find an expression for what stirred my mind. The first break with Impressionism was the sick child. I was looking for expression. And this is the painting of this idea of kind of a nightmare. There's a hazy feel to it. And this adds to the power of emotion that we feel. And our historian described it perfectly. It's a sense experience at close range, but hazily, as if viewed through tears or the veil of memory. That's why I like to quote him, because I think it's rather interesting and beautiful how it is described. But it seemed unfinished. It was criticized, of course. And another our critic said, and some critics liked it, but not many. So Munch said, I don't paint what I see, but what I saw. So this is his memory. This is his feelings. See, so she's in her deathbed. As I mentioned, she has difficulty breathing. She's covered with this blanket, but her stare is completely empty. He made 6 different versions. This is the second. I'm just showing you. By the way, he also had tuberculosis, and he nearly died from tuberculosis as a child, but he somehow survived. But he felt some kind of a guilt because some of his siblings died and he did not. And this is also therapeutical, probably, to paint. And this painting is described as a vivid study of the ravages of a degenerative disease, the tuberculosis. In the center, we have the 2 hands joining together. This is the idea of the drama, the pathos, everything that he wanted to express. So imagine doing this not only 6 times in oil, but many lithographs, etchings, dry points, etc. I'm just showing you here some of them, and very quickly, so you have the idea that the composition remained the same. What changed was the brushstroke, the colors, and the impasto, so the thickness of the paint. This one was exhibited in the Dresden Gallery, and during the Third Reich, it was called degenerate. So it was removed from the gallery. It was auctioned by the Nazis, and the Norwegian art dealer bought it. Today is at the Tate Gallery because it was donated a few years back. But this is one of the lithographs that he does, and the etching that he does. And here he incorporates also a landscape, the contrast of nature, blooming life, and human life that is dying. Again, we see the same idea, but only a detail of the big pillow and that vacant gaze of the sick child. Look at the cross-hatching, very, very expressive as well. And another version, this is the 5th. I'm just showing you some of them here all together. As you can see that there are very similar. The composition is very, very similar, but what changes are the expression of the brushstroke, the colors as well. Although this one is the same topic, but not the same composition. It's called Spring. Disease, insanity, and death were the angels that attended my cradle, said Munch, and since then have followed me throughout my life. What we see here is there is light and wind coming through the window. The curtains are moving. The plants are in front of it. So at least there is this idea of hope, probably. The same, probably Karen, the aunt. Probably this is, again, his sister that died. The movement that we get from it, there's also some kind of symbolism. A window also is the symbol of death that comes through the window. And in contrast, we have life, which is a plant, and light as well. So it's not the same, because through the painting on the left, the sick child on the left, we feel what he feels through his expression. On the right, you cannot feel that this child is dying. You feel sadness probably, but there's some kind of tranquility. The spring, the title, spring is there. The sun is out. There's some kind of warmth in the color palette as well. And even though this one was done later, he was exploring different expressions with the same topic. In 1930, he wrote to the director of the Oslo National Gallery, admitting that as for the sick child, it was a period, I think, as the age of the pillow. A great many painters did pictures of sick children on their pillows. So he was not alone in this topic. We have one that was very, very famous at the time, Christian Krog, and actually he was his teacher, by the way, with a sick child. We have the same large pillow, and here we have a self-portrait of Christian Krog, the big pillow in the back. She's sitting in this chair with a blanket covering his legs. And also we have many others. The mother here, look how the expression of the mother. So it was a fashion in the late 19th century and also in the beginning of the 20th century. We have a few expressions of the same topic, a few depictions of the same topic. But we go back to the representation of his sisters. And this is Inger, the younger sister, the baby of the family. This is a portrait when she was 14 years old in her black confirmation dress, which is an important moment, very traditional in style, very classic. And then he's going to make this portrait of Inger. And as we can see in this one, we see already the beginning of Munch, on Munch style. He had rented a house in Agerstrand in one of the fjords. Later, he's going to buy a house there. And he's going to simplify his forms. There's a lot of emotional content. This quiet pose, the tranquility. There's also the contrast between the large rocks and the white dress. The light suggests that it's one of those summer nights. So, because of course the sun almost never goes down during the summer. So it's Inger on the beach. And little by little, we see the composition, how he is expressing loneliness, melancholy probably. And the title is Evening. The only contrast is the white dress, but also look at the rocks. They are expressive. They are also an horizontal and vertical axis that are given by the figure on the right-hand side. It gives us this balance of color as well as part of the composition. The ocean in the back, as also the beautiful light that comes through. This was very much criticized, and it was described, the seated figure, as a physical entity with no trace of life on expression, as untrue in the form as in the color. On the whole, this seems to us to have such a low artistic value that his presence at the exhibition itself is difficult to defend. And some other critics would call this painting gibberish. And I find it beautiful because of that tranquility and that melancholy as well. Look at the expression, also that idea of being by herself. So very few liked it, and one said, to understand it, one must constantly have in mind that Munch is a poet, is a person who can be entirely covered by a mood to her and her playing devotedly, without regard to conventional laws and forms, often with a tendency to fantasy. So it's also kind of poetic, if you think about it. He's going to paint her in several locations, here in black and violet. So he portrays his family. We have a photograph of her that I showed you before. Inger again here in a white blouse. And I wanted to get to this one because this is his family. It looks like this room, an interior scene, looks like a theater stage. The postures are like fixed, like it would be, you have to be standing here, you have to be sitting down. Each one of the characters, each one of the figures are showing various emotions. It's a very clear style, what we call a synthesis style. The flattened areas are enclosed by strong contours of black, and the title is Death in the Sick Room. And you see that they are in mourning. They are sad. All of them are dressed in black. And again, he's reminding himself and the world of the death of his sister, Sophie. So the whole family is in mourning. but we don't see the dying child. The child is sitting right here in this very high chair. Each morning is reacting differently. Between them, there is no communication. They're not talking to each other. Each one has their own sadness within. And each one retreats into their lonely self. As you can see here, the father is praying. He is looking at the child. Laura is right in the foreground. She's the only one sitting. Remember, Laura had a mental illness, but later, not when Sophie died. Probably she was not diagnosed at the time. But the floorboards are also used as the lines to the vanishing points and breaks with a naturalistic perspective. So there's a double effect, the flattening and the widening of the room, like it would be a wide room so we can see all of the characters right here. But look at the lines of the perspective. The two of them go to different focal points, one to the head of the father and the other one to the head of one of the siblings, which we see right here. That makes a very interesting composition. But we see that Munch is focused on representing his family, but he's going to include it in the frieze of life. As he titled it, the whole series of paintings is the frieze of life, a poem about life, love, and death. It is about everything, every emotion. He made a lot of paintings dedicated to different parts of life, of the cycle of life, and the stages of love. And he's going to state the battle between men and women that is called love. So all of it, attraction, courtship, realization, disappointment, and of course, finally, death. And this is just an example photograph of an exhibition later on in 1903, which was actually very, very controversial as well. So Laura, the one that suffered the mental illness, is going to be portrayed here as an old woman already. This is a claustrophobic scene, even though we have an open window, and portrays her tragedy, the madness, the way that she has her clenched fist, and also that expression of her face. The whole room looks like it's tilted towards us. He also questions himself that probably he has this illness, this madness. Even though he survived tuberculosis, probably he has his madness in him. And he met Tula, Matilda Larsen. She was a liberated, very intelligent woman. They traveled together to Italy. They fall in love. And he did not believe in marriage. She did believe in marriage. He's drinking a lot. He has poor health. He will have a photograph of the two of them while they travel. He writes of himself in the third person. Ever since he was a child, he had hated marriage. He is sick. A nervous home had given him the feeling that he had no right to get married. Finally, he's going to separate from her in 1900. He is going to move to Berlin, but they have a very, very tragic separation. At some point, she says that she tries to commit suicide, and a friend calls Munch, and he tells him that she is very sad and she wants to commit suicide. So they meet. She has a gun, and they fight for the gun, and she's going to point at him, and actually he gets injured. She shoots at him, and he describes this not only in painting. He is portraying himself right here as he is injured and he is in the hospital, but he also writes about it. The bullet had exploded, pieces, bone and lead were embedded in the flesh and had to be removed. The pain caused sweat on his brow. He wanted to scream, but the many eyes that were fixed upon him for him to clench his jaws together instead. But he's talking about himself, the blood, of course. Not only that, but he portrays himself as a newer Marat, the hero of the revolution that was killed while he was in his tub. And this painting by Jacques-Louis David is the example of an idealized hero in the French Revolution. What he is representing him here is how he is being shot by Tula and he is dead. Also this one, where it is probably a little more similar, and look at the title, Still Alive, the Murderers, because he's referring to Tula, that she wanted to kill him. But look at this painting also of the death of Marat, the assassination of Marat. Well, we have Charlotte Corday, who was the killer, as a heroine, painted by Baudry, and here we have the representation of Edvard Munch, Tula Larsen right here, as the murderess. But of course, he survived. He had painted this one of the two of them together, and another man in the back, he was also very jealous, that he cut in half. Today they are put together, but because of course they were separated, he cut it in half, but now they're together again. So it's called, and so we have that Gauguin abandons his family and the family life. Then we have that Van Gogh depends on his family because he would depend emotionally through his description, but it's also financially. As I mentioned, Theo is going to provide him with money and also supplies. And Munch is traumatized by the suffering of his family, and he explores his feeling. The three of them, have different expressions of his families, of their families, and through their paintings, they show the different ways that they feel. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you had enjoyed today's class. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself. You can ask or comment whatever you want.
Thank you, Batia. It was wonderful.
Thank you,
It's
Carol.
great, really great. Thanks.
Yeah, there's Barry, as always. Hi, Barry.
Hi, I've missed too many of them. How are you? It's great to see you as always. A couple of quick questions. Gauguin and Van Gogh not successful in their lifetime. Was that kind of intrinsic to post-impressionism in general?
No, actually, many artists also were not very well liked during their lifetime. And also Van Gogh had a very short life, so he didn't have time. He only sold one painting throughout his life. But Gauguin did have some kind of, not a lot, but he would send his paintings to Paris, and they would sell. Later, he stayed in Tahiti, so he didn't need much, but he would have some kind of I wouldn't say wealth, but somehow he would get by.
Right. And then two other quick, one is just an interesting comment. I knew that I had read a long time or a while ago that Munch had ties to anarchists, and it was very interesting. The Marat thing is kind of interesting. That I didn't know about.
Close to the nihilism as well.
One would think if you're that depressed.
Exactly. You can put, that was in his when he was younger, and he was in Christiania, which is Oslo. It was named Christiania at the time. So he was part of this literary group. So they were also nihilists, anarchists, but later, of course, that changed a lot. And he was he lived by himself, and he liked to be by himself.
Then very quickly, lastly, you alluded to the dry points, but you didn't show them at all. And I'm curious as to why you made that choice.
I've just showed you a lithograph. No, I didn't show the dry points. I just show you a lithograph with the same topic. They're hard to find, but he made many others with the same topic of the sick child. I just wanted you to have an idea, and also because of time, I cannot show you everything. Okay. But I just chose a lithograph. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm reading whatever you're writing here. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to show you something that somebody is asking me that is the first time that they see something that is not The Scream by Edvard Munch. Yeah, on purpose. Of course, I didn't want to show The Scream, which everybody knows about it. Any other comments, questions, please? Just unmute yourself.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
Batia,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
great class. Muchas gracias. But I have a question. The son of Van Gogh or Gauguin, his name was Paul Roland, but he doesn't have the same last name as Gauguin.
No. Yes, he does. No, he does. But his name, yeah, they name him Pola. Everybody knows him as Pola. Search Pola.
Why? Paula, but
His name is
yeah.
Paul, and everybody knows him as Pola Gauguin. But yeah, he does.
So the name Roland is the first name. It's not the last name.
No. It's Paul Roland.
Paul Roland. Paul. Okay.
He has two names. Two names. And then Gauguin. But yeah, his last name is Gauguin. All of them. They have the name Gauguin. And he was an artist as well, as I mentioned. So you can search him, you can see his paintings.
Oh, it was an excellent program.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Anybody else? I think Marilyn wants to say something.
I loved it. It was even better than I thought it was going to be. So thank you. If anybody is interested, there is a book that is out there called The Secret Life of Sunflowers, and it's about Joanna, Theo's wife, and her picture that you had here is actually on the cover of that book. And it really tells all about Vincent van Gogh and Theo and Joanna and what she did to make Vincent van Gogh well-known, brought it to America, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not really sure. It's not totally fact. It probably is some historical fiction, but I found it to be an excellent read if anybody's interested.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Anybody else before we leave? Any other questions or comments? Nice to see you, Miriam, as well. Thank you.
We need more.
Right, I'm just reading. Okay. I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. Idania Lungo. Yes, you can write me. Let me write down my email. Somebody's asking me about learning more. So let me write down here my email. You can email me for sure.
More programs.
Well, wait a second. But I can say it. It's in the chat. Let me see. I know, but I put it. Let me just. Oh, I don't want a direct message. I don't know. Okay, I don't know how to write it. Wait, because I'm writing in the direct message, and I didn't want to do this. Okay, my email. I don't know what to do. Wait a second. I'm gonna write it again. Everyone. All right. I think I can do it like this. See if you got it.
This is in the chat?
Yeah, in the chat. Batia, FIU.
Yes, I see it.
Yeah, I didn't write it correctly, the Yahoo. I wrote it with one. Okay. Batia, FIU at yahoo.com. Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody is interested in other art classes, of course I have many of them and many courses, many other things. Just write me an email and I will. First of all, I will put you in my address group, and I'll send you the information if anybody's interested.
Okay.
Anybody else? Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. We're way over time,
Gracias.
but it's all worth it. So thank you, everybody, for
See you next
attending, and good night. Thanks, Batia.
Bye-bye.
I'm ending.
Bye.
Stop the recording. Yeah.